We so appreciate you taking the time and for having us on your bus.
It's a lot of fun.
Look, we are getting very close to this very first debate. What is your strategy?
Well, I'm sitting here in Iowa. We're having this conversation. I'm going from here day after tomorrow to New Hampshire. After that, I'll be in California, Nevada, Texas, Atlanta, South Carolina, and then back to Ohio. And that'll take us pretty darn close to the debate stage. So that gives you a sense of my strategy, which is to not be over artificial or over prepared, really, and instead continue to talk to voters across this country, which I think is probably the best form of debate prep.
Well, let's talk about some of the challenges that you're encountering. You've never held a public office before. You're trying to be the next president of the United States.
That's correct.
Why do you think voters should believe that you are best equipped for that position? And what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing on the campaign trail just in terms of introducing yourself to the American people?
Well, if somebody broke your car, you don't turn it over to them to fix it. And I think our government is badly broken, and it's been broken by the people who have been running that government or serving in that government. So when it comes to the next president of the United States, I think we absolutely need an outsider. I think we need an outsider, preferably from a different generation. I'm the one person in this race, I think, who is not just leading us from something. I'm leading us to start running to something, to an actual vision of what it means to be an American, with an actual agenda, not just against the failed Biden agenda. That's boring. I think it's just, Republican Party often sounds like a bunch of partisan hacks at that time. I don't talk about Biden a ton. I talk more about what we stand for. That's how we win this election in a landslide. And I don't come from the world of partisan politics. I think that's actually a competitive advantage. I think that's actually what it's going to take to restore integrity and accountability to government, to dismantle the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. And I think I've been an entrepreneur. I understand how to build things. I'm an executive. I think those are going to be useful skill sets in leading us from the White House. But even more importantly, to actually have a vision that reaches the next generation of Americans.
There's been a lot that has been said about your campaign. One of the things that I do keep hearing is Trump 2.0. Why should voters support you over the former president if he's in this race again?
Well, I call it America First 2.0. And the reality is, I think Trump was an excellent president. He laid a great foundation on policies that many people who even aren't Republicans quietly agree with them now. Building the border wall, controversial then, widely accepted today. The truth is, I'm going further than Trump did. Building the wall is insufficient. There are cartel-financed tunnels underneath that wall. I support using the U.S. military to secure our southern border. That's what it's going to take to end the fentanyl crisis in this country, to end the human trafficking and illegal migrant crisis. I don't just favor putting Betsy DeVos on top of the Department of Education and say, fix it. I stand for shutting it down, like so many other parts of the administrative state. But I think I will be better positioned to unite the country, to win the next election in a landslide. I don't think there's another Republican in this race who can deliver a Reagan 1980-style landslide like I think I'm in a position to do.
Uniting the country is something I hear a lot from Republican candidates as I cover this campaign. I want to ask you about some of the indictments with the former president. As you know, there are several investigations.
Yes.
And he could possibly be on trial right as the Republican primary starts to heat up. Do you see that as a distraction for where the party should be heading?
Well, I want to talk about it at the level of the nation. I think it is a disastrous precedent that we're setting as a country, that the ruling party, the party in power, will use politicized force in the middle of an election to try to eliminate its opposition. That's not the country I want to see. When you and I are having this conversation as we speak, I'm polling at third in the Republican national primary, and some polls now creeping into second. It would be a lot easier for me if Donald Trump were not in this race. That's not how I want to win. That's not right. The way we do it in this country is that we, the people, get to decide who governs. And I think this is a real betrayal of the way we live in a constitutional republic. And so I think it's really important for those of us who are running against Trump to be especially abundantly clear about how wrong those prosecutions are. That's why it disappoints me when other Republicans are trying to seize and take advantage of that to find a hole. No, I think we have to stand on the side of principle, stand on the side of justice.
Right now, there's going to be a debate in Congress about supplying another round of funding to Ukraine.
Yes.
Do you believe that's necessary?
Not only do I not believe it's necessary, I believe it is downright ill-advised and corrupt. Joe Biden, the Democrats, and many of the Republicans in the neocon establishment as well have yet to articulate what is the U.S. national interest that's at stake. It makes zero sense. And then you say, hey, that's the same administration whose president has a son that was paid millions of dollars by a state-affiliated energy company on whose board he had no business serving, while that same president was the vice president. Now does it make sense why we're using $200 billion of taxpayer aid? I think that is a legitimate question to ask, and frankly, the answer does not smell good.
If you're commander-in-chief, does financial support for Ukraine end?
Yes.
Yes. Stop.
Stops. And you know what else stops? The war stops. I will lead the way in negotiating a peace deal. Freeze the current lines of control. A Korean War-style armistice agreement. I will further make a hard commitment that NATO should never admit Ukraine. But in return, I will require that Vladimir Putin exit Russia's military partnership with China. The China-Russia military alliance is the single greatest military threat to the United States. And I am stunned that neither political party or a leader in either political party has either the spine or the perception to actually talk about it. This is the real threat we face, and we are doing ourselves no favors by driving Russia further into China's arms. That's what's happening day by day.
You've made a lot of headlines for parts of your campaign platform and policy, including the elimination, the call to eliminate certain federal agencies, starting with the Department of Justice, Department of Education, and the FBI.
Yes.
Do you not see any purpose at all for those agencies?
In some cases, those agencies have purposes that should not exist. The Department of Education is in that category. The federal government should have nothing to do with administering local education. Shut it down is the answer. The FBI is a redundant agency. And when you have a redundant agency, that's a formula for corruption, which is exactly what we see. Corruption and politicization. So in some ways, that policy may sound extreme to some people. And you know what? The founding ideals of this country, let's own them. They are extreme. The fact that we, the people, live in a constitutional republic with a government that's accountable to us, not the other way around, yes. For most of human history, that is an extreme ideal, and I'll own it. But it's also deeply practical. The 35,000 employees at the FBI, well, 20,000 of them are in back office functions. That's where the rot begins, the politicization. People who report into work at the J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI that really shouldn't have had those jobs in the first place, we're going to cut them. And we're going to say, go find honest work in the private sector. Now, there are 15,000 agents, good people on the front lines that are doing important work. We will make a better use of those individuals by reassigning them to the U.S. Marshals, doing a much better job on the child sex trafficking front in fighting that than the FBI is. We'll reassign them to places like the DEA, much better job on fighting the fentanyl crisis than random generalists at the FBI are doing. We'll reassign them to the Financial Enforcement Network, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury, far greater expertise to fight complex white-collar crime and theft than the generalists at the FBI. That is how we both increase the effectiveness of a federal government that's taking on, frankly, issues that they've been wildly ineffective at taking on. And I think you'll find other candidates who, after I generally say these things, will repeat the slogans. But we need somebody who actually has the ability to see that through and get it done. And that's why I'm in this race.
How do you do it?
Well, I think I use strong legal authority to do it. I think you need a president who's an outsider. That's what I bring to the table, and I share that in common with Trump. In my case, I actually built the companies from scratch. I didn't, inherit anything. I built the companies from zero to nothing. My parents came to this country with no money. I've built multi-billion-dollar companies, but I respect Trump's success as a businessman, but I don't respect professional political experience of spouting off slogans without actually building something in the private sector. Because if you've been a CEO, like me, you know that if somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without having any authority to change it. So I refuse to be that kind of puppet sitting in the White House. I also know and deeply understand the Constitution and the laws of this country. I won't let the managerial class tell me that the civil service protections stop me from carrying out my vision, because I've actually read the law. Read the civil service protections. They protect against individual politicized firings. They do not apply to mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are absolutely what I am bringing to the D.C. bureaucracy.
You even admit that a lot of people would look at that policy and think, this is extreme. Would you expect legal challenges to that?
Yes, I do. And I think that's a good thing, because I've also studied the current Supreme Court. and they agree with me 6-3 on this. The same Supreme Court that ruled in West Virginia versus EPA, striking down those unconstitutional regulations. The same Supreme Court that appropriately struck down the Biden student loan forgiveness program via the Department of Education. Yes, that same constitutional understanding, the one that I share, the one that the justices that I appoint will share. I'm the only candidate who's outlined which federal judges and justices I would appoint. That's how we drive change on the timescale of history. So it'll be a good thing when I get sued, because we take that to the Supreme Court and then codify this understanding of the Constitution into judicial precedent. That is how we drive change on the timescale of history.
I can tell you, I've been traveling the country. I've made a lot of stops here in Iowa, and I've talked to a lot of voters, and even the ones that aren't supporting you are intrigued by your platform and are impressed by what you said on the stump. I know you're in this race to be the next president of the United States, to win the nomination. If you are not the nominee, would you consider being a running mate to the former president? Would you consider even a cabinet position?
I will be the nominee. That is my firm expectation. And the reality is that many of these people who I'm pleased to say they're saying complimentary things even if they're not voting for me, they hadn't heard of me 6 months ago, or 5 months ago, or even 4 months ago in many cases. And so we're exactly where we want to be ahead of the first debate. My job in this race is to be transparent about who I am, what do I stand for, why am I in this race, and what will I deliver. If every voter across this country knows that and then they don't want to vote for me, I'm at peace with that decision. What we're seeing is that my name ID is still relatively lower than the other candidates, and yet I'm polling at second or third. That's a good sign to say once people do get to know what I stand for, they're coming with us. And so that's why I'm pretty, as a data-driven guy, pretty confident we're going to win. We're not even buying TV ads, even in states like the ones we're in yet, where other candidates are spending boatloads of money on TV ads to just sustain their poll numbers. I think it's a very good sign for us. But I'm not attached to the results because this isn't about me, it's about the country. My question is, how do I have maximal impact on this country?
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.